I call Sandra Gowdy.
Mr Speaker, I rise to express my support for the Biosecurity Law Reform Bill and the very necessary changes that go with that, and I commend it to the House.
I call Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Yes, I think despite its brevity, that's the best speech Sandra Gowdy's given in Parliament, in my time here anyway. Well, no, it's a low bar, Mrs Gowdy. It's a low bar. Mr Speaker, it gives me pleasure to actually rise in this debate because this is a bill that I believe is timely. I think that on this side of the House we recognise that the issues around biosecurity are constantly evolving. And while the 1993 Biosecurity Act provided a good basis for us managing our borders and our immediate environment, time moves quickly in the area of biosecurity, and there is indeed a need for an update. There's absolutely no doubt that New Zealand, perhaps more than any other developed country, relies on high-quality biosecurity measures. Mr Hayes, being someone who would know a great deal about this from his time working defending our borders, and New Zealand in fact has around 80% of the primary production we have each year is exported. And when we look at some of the numbers here, Mr Speaker, it really does emphasise the importance of this. Nearly $20 billion of agricultural and food exports, $3.2 billion of horticultural exports, $3.4 billion of forestry product exports, 64% of our total merchandise exports coming from the primary production area. So this is critical to our economy. The kind of comprehensive review and measures that are required from time to time in the biosecurity field is what we're seeing here, and I think it is therefore an important bill for us to focus on tonight. And indeed such an important bill that we would expect perhaps slightly more contribution from the National Government. We've had limited contributions throughout this urgency process, which does make one wonder quite how urgent the National Government really sees these matters as being. But we certainly know on biosecurity that we're pleased that this bill has come before the House. The Biosecurity Act was put in place in 1993. 17 years later, the world is quite different. And it is important that as we acknowledge the changes in the way people travel around the world, the frequency of travel that is undertaken by people, the way that goods move around the world, and the fact that new markets are opening up all the time, that goods are being produced in multiple countries and exported to New Zealand, that people and goods are travelling together more often, that we need measures that acknowledge that. We also have to acknowledge the rapid change in technology, and a lot of what is in the Biosecurity Act of 1993 actually reflects a manual system of processing, where nowadays we have a lot more computerised systems of processing, and obviously that needs to be worked through. Also, after 17 years of operation, the Biosecurity Act has thrown up one or two issues that perhaps have shown it not working so well, and that's particularly so, some would say, in the area of pest management and the way in which relationships are formed between regional and local authorities and central government, and it's good to see that those issues are being picked up here. There have also been changes in the way in which our marine environment is managed, New Zealand's relationships with other countries and the way the exclusive economic zone has been developed, and the way in which our international maritime law has continued to evolve. So all of those things have occurred since 1993, and it's important that the bill is updated to reflect those things. And so the bill, as other speakers have said, moves through a number of different areas. As I've said, it particularly looks at the question of the marine environment. There are several amendments in that area, both looking at the exclusive economic zone, making sure that the measures in the Act are consistent with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and also introducing a new instrument into the bill, the Craft Risk Management Standard, which will set out biosecurity requirements for craft arriving in New Zealand. And I do note from the regulatory impact statement, Mr Speaker, that this was an issue in the consultation process, and one that I'm sure will be taken up during the select committee process around how these craft risk management standards will be implemented. Stakeholders who were involved in that certainly wanted to see New Zealand's biosecurity standards mesh with international standards and conventions where possible, but they were questioning in that consultation process the application and use of those standards, how practical it will be, and whether or not the movements will apply to craft who are moving around New Zealand or actually arriving in New Zealand. And all of those issues were raised raised in the consultation process, and I do hope that the Select Committee will take them up, because while this sounds like a reasonable idea that there should be a consistent craft risk management standard, it's new territory and it needs to be clear, and obviously those people involved have expressed that already in the consultation process, and we certainly hope that will be taken up further. Mr Speaker, as I said earlier on, there is also an alteration through this bill in terms of the Crown in relation to regional pest management strategies, making sure that they're aligned. And there is some concern again in the regulatory impact statement about the potential cost on the Crown for that. And in fact, the RAS makes clear that there hasn't been time yet to identify exactly what those costs are. So I think that will be another issue that the Select Committee will want to look at. The bill will also allow national and regional pest management plans to be more effectively developed and allow the development of plans at that level to address the movement of harmful organisms. So that's all stuff that we certainly on this side of the House would be happy to support investing in. I do note that the bill amends the scope of the Wild Animal Control Act of 1977. That's an act that Mr Twyford knows well. And in particular, no, they haven't actually yet. It's incredible, really. Well, no. We'll just note that there are two particular animals that have been looked here, which are currently managed solely under the Wild Animal Control Act that will become under the Biosecurity Act. Possums and wallabies. And what I'm really wanting to know is, does Robbie Deans fit within the definition of a wallaby? Russell Norman may be worried, that's true, Damien, but I'm wanting to know whether... That's right, he's perhaps both a possum and a wallaby, Mr Mallard. So we'll certainly be interested to see the extent to which the definition of wallaby will be contained in the changes being suggested there. The other area that I want to mention, Mr Speaker, is in terms of the clarity of roles and relationships and collaboration and partnerships. And certainly, again, looking at the regulatory impact statement, this is an area where in the consultation there was strong support from stakeholders for improving the clarity around the relationships between MAF biosecurity, regional and local authorities, industry and other importers. And clearly, as Dr Norman's already mentioned, in a system like New Zealand with such a great number of imports and exports and the need to do a huge amount of assessment, not everything can be assessed. And we do need to ensure that the partnerships are in place to make sure that quality assessment can take place, that the things that we need to be looking at are looked at. And it's on the subject of those relationships, Mr Speaker, that I want to now move to the impact of the decision made by the National Government to cut 55 frontline staff from MAF Biosecurity. And it is that kind of reaction I'd expect from the Honourable Ruth Dyson, because it is a remarkable thing. Having spent a considerable amount of time here working through both the importance of biosecurity to New Zealand and the changes since 1993, it's remarkable in the context of this bill to then realise that this government has cut 55 frontline positions from MAF biosecurity. The very area that we've established throughout this debate is essential to New Zealand's economy, is essential to our environmental health and well-being, and this government has cut those positions. Now, we've heard from David Carter in previous times, well, that's because there were fewer imports of particular types of cars coming into New Zealand. Well, how short-sighted is that? That's no way to manage a biosecurity system in New Zealand, to say, well, right at the moment we haven't quite got enough imports and exports to justify these staff. What happens when there's an incursion? What happens when tourism starts to rise again? We have the expensive cost of going through and re-employing of those people, or not, as the case may be. We need to invest in biosecurity in New Zealand, and that includes the people who protect our borders. They are truly frontline staff. This government came into office with a promise not to cut frontline public servants. This was the first and biggest example of a straight-out breaking of that promise. And throughout New Zealand, throughout the sectors that are affected by this, there has been concern about this. Horticulture New Zealand, the Flower Exporters Association, all of these people, federated farmers, all of these people have expressed concern that cutting 55 frontline positions puts at risk New Zealand's biosecurity. There is not much more important to our economy than protecting our borders. We need to ensure that MAF biosecurity has adequate staff in order to be able to perform the important roles that are noted in this bill. Mr Speaker,